In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I left that town in 1978, but not before it marked me with an enduring love of Buckeye football. So I lived across the street from the track coach, so as his son was a buddy of mine, I got free tickets often to the stadium. And when you walk through the Horseshoe Stadium, they have built it so that the entrance is based on the Pantheon in Rome. You were entering a temple when you enter Buckeye football. And still, I'll do just about anything to try and find that on the internet. It's not something I've been terribly successful at, but once I get my VPN network, you'll never see me again during football season. More recently, I've been watching the career of Simone Biles, who was born in Columbus, Ohio, where she still maintains a house. And you remember, perhaps, at the Rio Olympics in 2011, that she and Ali Rassman unfurled a beautiful gymnastic routine, or routines, there at that Olympics, the same Olympics, which Michael Phelps stunned us with his 200-meter individual medley. It was a beautiful thing to behold. Simone Biles from Columbus, Ohio. And last week, Simone Biles nailed the riskiest balance beam dismount in the history of that sport at the U.S. National Championships, a double somersault with a full twist in each flip. And if that wasn't badass enough, the next day, she nailed the triple-double on the floor exercise, a double back somersault with 3 twists. Now, my guess is that Simone Biles just didn't wake up that morning and decide to do that. That she had practiced, that she had shown discipline and commitment in order to achieve that kind of grace under pressure. Discipline, commitment, practice, they are important features of all of our lives. The New York Times has reported recently that a petition is now afoot in Britain to include church bell ringing in the 2020 Olympics. It is fairly arduous, apparently, ringing church bells. There are many bell-ringing societies on almost all the university campuses in Britain, each one with its own coat of arms. There are 40,000 bell-ringing enthusiasts, which are called campanologists. 40,000 campanologists in England alone. And my personal belief is that we have 40,000 campanologists at 6:30 in the morning every day here in San Miguel. These folks ring big church bells in high towers. They pull on strong ropes. It is strenuous business. And because a 3-hour peal can feel like a marathon, the campanologists have appealed to be included in the 2020 Olympics. And if they are, we are going to sing Carol. I think we're at our best. We are at our most alive. We contribute to and touch the lives of others when our passion intersects our commitment. And when that happens, we become a particular kind of person. St. Paul called us peculiar people. You are a royal priesthood, a peculiar people created for God's own possession, that you might richly show forth the magnitude of his marvelous works. Because you are peculiar people. I knew it. St. Paul said so. And one of the reasons, you may wonder where I'm going, one of the reasons that we commit to, that we practice Sabbath, Sunday worship, is so that we may become a particular kind of people. You have not come to something that can be touched, to a blazing fire, or darkness, or gloom, or tempest. You have come to Mount Zion and to the living God, the judge of all. See to it you do not refuse the one who is speaking. That poetic language reminds us that we are not inhabiting ordinary space when we gather at church. We arrive at something like the Olympics, a great peal of bells. The author of Hebrews gives us vision and warning and reminds us that we worship a God who is not only our loving friend, but also a consuming fire. God is in our midst, and we are meant to stay alert, especially for the sermon. My grandfather owned a company back when Ohio was still an industrial power. They made all kinds of things. This company was called Metals Trades. They made the sculpture that is still standing outside the Pittsburgh airport. Air conditioning ducts, I-beams, steel tubes. And I learned that the making of a simple steel tube is a fascinating process because once in a while my pap would take me down to the factory to watch, and we'd stand in the control module, which was also known as the pulpit. And there in the pulpit, you could watch streams of molten metal pouring down a sluice, and the metal would be chopped off, and mechanical arms would come and grasp the metal on either side and spin it, and the centrifugal force would open up that steel piece of molten metal into a bar tube. A bar of steel would become a tube with the action of centrifugal force. And the most important thing my pap said in that process was the temperature of the metal. Because if it were too hot, it would fly apart. And if it were too cold, it would not open. You need to catch the metal at the right molten moment if it is to bloom into a perfect tube. And I think that is some of what we are up to here when we arrive at worship at church. We create a useful spiritual temperature, a molten moment that will permit God to open us up to His purpose for us in the world. If you refrain from trampling the Sabbath, from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, says Isaiah, if you call the Sabbath a delight, if you honor it, not going your own ways, not serving your own interests, not pursuing your own affairs, then you shall take delight in the Lord. The practice of worship regulates self-interest. It nurtures a delight in the presence of God, and it shapes our character. And who we delight in is who we become. What happened to that afflicted woman who encountered Rabbi Jesus while worshiping in the synagogue? She had been tormented for 18 years. Jesus encounters her. She is transformed. And some are outraged because he has broken official protocol and healed on the Sabbath, because they do not understand what the Sabbath is for. They have mistaken the disciplines which yield character with mere rule-keeping. So good news, the Sabbath isn't about a check mark, a duty done. If you miss a Sabbath, that lightning storm that we saw last week is not after you. What the Sabbath is for is to unbend our cramped lives. The Sabbath frees and forms us so that we can contend for the right and good and delight in God. And the woman encounters Jesus and stands tall for the first time in 18 years, and she sees the world from a fresh perspective. And for the first time in 18 years, she is able to look into the eyes of her companions as an equal. She is freed and she is empowered. Jesus stands in a unique political lineage. He doesn't fit with the narrow interpretation, the rule-bound interpretation of the Pharisees. His politics were too tame for the revolutionary zealots. They thought he was sort of namby-pamby, that he should take up arms against the Romans. And he was far too rambunctious for the austere Essenes, who thought that people just ought to pray their lives away. Jesus really pleases nobody. He claims the spiritual lineage of the prophets, Amos and Hosea and Isaiah and Jeremiah, who were concerned with God's mishpat, the order of compassionate justice. Worship transforms the people of God so that they can bring transformation to the places in which they dwell. And Jesus tells them that to miss mercy, to miss compassion, is to miss transformation. It is to have missed the meaning of the Sabbath. To delight in the Lord is to delight in justice and in mercy. Church-going, you may have noticed, has become somewhat passé as communal disciplines have loosened, as the ascent of individualism has increased in the Western world. Now the good life is conceived almost exclusively in terms of one's inner life, as we are drawn to the world's many glad offerings. But we are a peculiar people, and so we gather regularly for worship, which strengthens our character and opens us to a deeper delight and to a useful purpose. So worship is not primarily about duty. It is a place where we can be formed. It brings us to the molten moment, like those tubes of metal flowing in my grandfather's factory. And if there are things in your life so upending that your soul is nearly ready to fly apart, then worship can adjust the temperature down, cool you off. And if your heart has gone stone cold, then worship can help raise the temperature so you are ready to be spun by God's centrifugal force. Simone Biel seems so effortless as she flies through the gymnastic air, but it's because she has disciplined herself and she has practiced. And so too our lives must be undergirded by the practices and disciplines which shape us to delight in God and God's world and one another. Christ lays his hands on each of us and we stand tall and we have a new perspective and we can greet our colleagues and companions on the way with new life and gladness. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness. That is Isaiah's moral vision. It takes a spiritual visit to restrain the worst in all of us and to fit us for the doing of good, to remove the yokes from the afflicted. When I watch Simone Biles, even on the internet, I edge forth to the edge of my seat. I get close to the computer screen. I have to clean it later. Sometimes, if the Buckeyes are having a good season, I edge forward in my seat. In the best sporting events, we watch passion intersect with commitment. We see challenge colluding with opportunity. I bet campanologists feel the same way after 3-hour pealed bells. I bet Karen feels that way after Christmas Mass when she's done pealing the bells. So edge forward today into our God who is a consuming fire so that God may recalibrate your temperature so that you can be opened up from the inside out by God's centrifugal force and made into useful steel. Unbend and stand tall with your fresh perspective. Meet the eyes of your companions and head for the uneven bars or the 200-meter swim or ring some bells. The Sabbath is a gift so that we might find the molten moment, so that we may be shaped for mishpat, the order of compassionate justice. And as we discipline ourselves for character, we will more and more become peculiar people. Some of you are well on your way. Taking delight and standing tall and watching as our light rises in the darkness.